In this video, I will show you how to make your own ID wallet. First, I'll show you the materials and supplies that you'll need. You'll need to grab your pattern information and all the requirements. The link is in the description. So let's get started. Before you begin, you're going to be cutting out your pieces using the directions from your pattern. You'll have two of the interior, then the exterior. These are your ID window pieces. You'll also have some fusible fleece. Those will be attached later to the back side of the exterior pieces. And also your lanyard tape. We'll use some of that for some other things. I've already fused Shapeflex to the back of all of these pieces, so we don't have to worry about doing that later. You will also need some supplies. I have a nice little rotary board. It's a great size for this project. I have a small rotary cutter. I love this one. Use it all the time. This is just a little chopstick I got from the Chinese food restaurant. And then you'll have other supplies like this purple thing. It's very handy for poking out corners. This tip it's just really great and handy. You'll also need some wonder clips, some straight pins. I would recommend using a 40 weight thread. This is an Aurifil 40 weight thread. It's great for making bags. You'll also need this Easy Steam 2. I like it better than Wonder Tape, and we'll talk about that a little bit more here into the video. I would also, you're going to want to get fray check and some hardware. This is a D-ring. It's a 1/2 inch D-ring. And I link to it. I get it from Amazon, so I link to it in the description. And this lobster class swivel hook, I get this from Amazon too, and I'll link to that in the description as well. They're super great. They get attached to the lanyards. Now here are some tools that are nice to have. You don't necessarily have to have these in order to make the ID wallet. I like to put rivets in my lanyard, and I use my rivet press. With the rivet press, I'll need the particular size of die that works in conjunction with my press, and then I have some rivets, the posts and the caps also in that particular size. In order to put the rivets in, then you'll need a leather punch, and I use that, this particular one. All of these materials are listed in the description. This is actually used by glass makers, but it helps me push down some material that's a little bulky. And then I also use my Violet Craft seam roller to push down the fabric and make it a little skinnier. Take your two pieces of fabric that are used for your ID window, and you're going to turn one of them over and make your marks on them, just as the pattern indicates. You have your outside stitching line, and then the inside line where your tape goes, and then our cutting line, which is in the middle. So once you have it marked, then you put right sides together, and then you put a little pin in the middle of that to hold that together. We're going to take this over to the sewing machine and stitch along the outside line to get those put together. Right out here on this outside perimeter, we're going to sew the whole thing closed. Here at the sewing machine, we're going to do a back stitch at every turn, and then I'm going to speed up this video because I think you've all seen everyone sew a straight line. We are sewing on the outside line, and again, those measurements are found in your pattern. You can get that information. The link is in the profile. Now that that's sewn together, we're going to trim off the edges, and then we're going to also use our small rotary cutter and cut the center out, or at least an X. Back at our workstation here, we're going to trim up this ID window. Get those extra threads out of the way because I'm a thread clipper. We're going to just put our rotary cutter through the X right in the center, right along those lines. You're going to want to make sure that you don't go past the interior box markings, and you want to get all the way to the edge. sometimes you have to take your little snips and trim either up close. Just take your time. This is, you want to be as accurate as you can with this step. So right now I'm just checking. Whoops, it looks like I didn't make that cut entirely. I think I might just use my trimmer here. Yeah, that's a little easier. So I'm just checking the corners to make sure, well, I need to probably change my blade. I'm just checking the corners to make sure that I got all that fabric cut back far enough. And now we're going to use the Easy Steam, and we're going to put it along the inside square, along each side. And then we're going to, I'm just going to use a tube that or a roll that I already have open, that I have in use. And the reason I like this Easy Steam tube better than like a Wonder Tape is because this just tears away and doesn't get all gummy. You know, I've tried both. I just happen to like this one a little bit better. You do need to add some heat to it in order to have that paper come off easily and the adhesive to stick to your fabric. But since this ID window is going to be pressed into submission throughout the whole process, then that's fine with me. Just add a little bit of heat and get that pressure sensitive fusible tape set in there. And then you just peel back the paper, and then you can see a little bit of shiny residue left over. That's the adhesive that we need on each one of those sides. So we'll just peel all of that back. Now the next part is to open up these inside flaps. There's two layers, so it's going to be the inside flap. We're just going to press back, and then we're going to also use, well, let's just press all of these back. Get all of those, all four corners. And the last one. Then I'm going to be using the Violet Craft steamroller, or seam roller rather, and just roll that down, make that nice and flat. It really does help set that adhesive. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side with some Easy Steam on. And we don't have the markings on the second side, but you can see where the slit starts and ends. So you can kind of eyeball it. It's the markings aren't absolutely necessary on the back side. They are helpful for me on the front side though. So we'll do this all the way around, just like we did on the first one, or on the first side. And then we'll add a little bit of heat to that. Looks good. A little bit of heat. Make that set. And we'll peel off the remaining strips of fusible tape. There we go. Now we're just going to be folding these back, and we're going to match them up exactly with the other one on top. You see the piece of fabric that's peeking up from the back side. You're going to want to match that up exactly. And then they end up aligning really nicely right there. Now that those are all pushed back, I'm just going to put some heat on both sides of this and press it down nice and flat. Next, I'm going to use some fray check on the corners, on each of these corners, and this is just going to make sure that any threads in the fabric don't fray, and that's basically what fray check does. And you don't want to use too much of it. It will get hard as it dries, which is what you want. And if you're working with lighter fabric, you want to use just a little bit less, because sometimes it does make your fabric a little bit darker. Now we're just going to let that dry before we do the next part. Now that it's dried, I'm going to be using my scissors and cutting away the excess fabric that's extending past the flaps here. And now we're just going to trim off the edges and about 1/8 of an inch along each side. And now that we've got all of our trimming done, we're going to turn this right side out. During this step, we're just going to be pinching each corner and flipping those right side out. I use the purple thing to help get those corners out. Don't push too hard or it might poke right through the sewing that you've done. So just do that to each corner, and then we're going to press that down. You're going to line up your top and your bottom fabric together and give that a nice pressing. Don't be afraid to let it sit for just a bit. I wouldn't let it sit for more than 10 seconds on each side. You don't want to scorch your fabric. Next, we're going to be adding the vinyl to the inside of our ID window, right inside there. I like to use Wonder Clips to secure one side of the vinyl. Let me give you a closer look of kind of how that's laid out. And then I open up the two inside layers and I start pushing that vinyl inside, in between those two layers. Just get it nice and flat, and then use a Wonder Clip to secure that side, and then just start working on the other sides. And once you have the vinyl in between both sides of the ID window, we'll take it over to the sewing machine and sew that down. Now we'll be sewing at about 1/8 of an inch to even closer to the inside of the ID window. Obviously not on the vinyl, but just inside of that area. You're going to want to back stitch at the beginning and end of that. And then your vinyl piece is secured in between those two layers of fabric. And now we're going to secure it onto the exterior. I've already fused the fusible fleece onto the back side. And now I'm going to take my, my ID window with the vinyl and center it onto the exterior front of my ID wallet. I'm going to use my ruler, and following the measurements that are given in the pattern about how far away from the bottom the ID window needs to be, I'll line that up and center it and then pin it. I'll put some pins on 3 of the 4 corners. I don't want to put it on the top right because that's where I'm going to start sewing, but I'll put it in the other 3 corners. And then I will make sure that I have the same amount of space on each side, just to ensure that the ID portion is centered. And then I'm going to take it and stitch about 1/8 of an inch around each edge, leaving the top open. While you're sewing the ID window onto the exterior front, you're going to want to make sure that you do your back stitching at the beginning and the end. There's going to be a lot of use getting your ID in and out of there, so you want to make sure it's secure. And then I use like a store loyalty card, which is the same size usually as your ID, and just give it a test before I put anything else together. And That looks like it's snug, not too loose. It's a good fit. And that is how you make the ID window and attach it to the exterior front. Cool. Don't miss our next video where I show you how to complete the wallet. If you liked this video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe so you won't miss a thing.